A brief history of UFC. UFC is a mixed martial arts promotion that was founded in 1993 by Art Davie and Rorian Gracie. The first event featured a tournament-style format with fighters from various martial arts backgrounds, and it quickly gained a reputation as a brutal and controversial sport. Over the years, UFC has evolved to include weight classes, more rules and regulations, and has become one of the most popular combat sports in the world. UFC was originally created by Art Davie and Rorian Gracie as a way to showcase the effectiveness of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a martial art that Gracie had helped to develop. The first event, UFC 1, featured a tournament-style format with fighters from various martial arts backgrounds, including boxing, kickboxing, and sumo wrestling. The event was controversial due to its violent nature, but it also attracted a lot of attention and helped to establish UFC as a major combat sport. What makes UFC unique? One of the key things that set UFC apart from other combat sports is the various fighting styles used, including boxing, wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and kickboxing. The Octagon, which is the 8-sided fighting surface used in UFC, is also unique, as is the use of weight classes and the different rules and regulations in place. Fighters are able to use a wide range of techniques, including striking, grappling, and submissions, and are encouraged to be well-rounded in their abilities. The Octagon, which is the fighting surface used in UFC, is also unique, as it allows for maximum visibility for the audience and provides a safe and controlled environment for the fighters. Famous UFC fighters. Some of the most famous UFC fighters of all time include Conor McGregor, who has become one of the biggest stars in combat sports thanks to his brash personality and impressive fighting skills. Georges St-Pierre is another legendary fighter who has won championships in multiple weight classes, while Ronda Rousey helped to popularize women's MMA with her dominant performances in the Octagon. In addition to the fighters mentioned earlier, some other famous UFC fighters include Anderson Silva, who is considered one of the greatest mixed martial artists who helped to popularize UFC in the early 2000s with his aggressive fighting style. Nate Diaz is another popular fighter who has gained a reputation for his toughness and willingness to fight anyone, anywhere, at any time. Rivalries and controversies. One of the most famous rivalries in UFC history is the feud between Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov, which boiled over after their fight in 2018 and led to a brawl between their teams. Controversies in UFC have included doping scandals, disputes over referee decisions, and concerns over fighter safety. In addition to the feud between Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov, some other famous rivalries in UFC history include John Jones versus Daniel Cormier and Tito Ortiz versus Chuck Liddell. Controversies in UFC have included issues with performance-enhancing drugs, weight cutting, and fighter safety. In recent years, the organization has taken steps to address these issues and promote a safer and more ethical sport. Unique facts about UFC. Some lesser-known facts about UFC include the fact that the original tournament was conceived as a way to determine the most effective martial art, and that the first event featured fighters from 8 different styles. Women's UFC fights were only introduced in 2012, and the organization has since become a leader in promoting women's combat sports. Some other interesting facts about UFC include the fact that the first event featured only one weight class, with no weight limits, and that the tournament format was eventually phased out in favor of single matches. UFC has also had its fair share of celebrity fans, including actors like Sylvester Stallone and Mark Wahlberg, as well as musicians like Rihanna and Snoop Dogg. UFC rules. UFC has a specific set of rules that are designed to promote fighter safety and ensure a fair and competitive contest. Some of the key rules include using weight classes, prohibiting certain strikes such as groin strikes and headbutts, and using a referee to enforce the rules and stop the fight if necessary. Fighters are also required to wear specific gear, including gloves and protective cups. Weight classes. UFC has 8 weight classes for men and 4 weight classes for women. The weight classes are determined by the maximum weight a fighter can weigh prior to a bout. Rounds. UFC bouts consist of 3 or 5 rounds, depending on whether the fight is a championship bout. Each round is 5 minutes long with a 1-minute rest period between rounds. Scoring. UFC bouts are scored using a 10-point must system. In this system, the winner of each round is awarded 10 points, while the loser is awarded 9 points or fewer, depending on how dominant the round was. If a round is considered a draw, both fighters are awarded 10 points. Fouls. UFC has strict rules regarding fouls, which include strikes to the groin, back of the head, or spine, as well as eye gouging, biting, and hair pulling, among others. If a fighter commits a foul, they may be deducted points, disqualified, or have the bout declared a no contest. Referee. A referee is present in the octagon during the bout to enforce the rules and ensure fighter safety. The referee can stop the bout if a fighter is unable to defend themselves or if a foul has been committed. Judges. 3 judges are present at ringside to score the bout using the 10-point must system. UFC records. Some of the most notable records include Anderson Silva's 16 consecutive wins, Demetrius Johnson's 11 successful title defenses, and John Jones's 14 wins in championship fights. UFC facilities. The Apex is a state-of-the-art facility that was built specifically for UFC events and includes a full-size octagon, a production studio, and training and recovery areas for fighters. UFC also has its own Performance Institute in Las Vegas, which is a multi-purpose training facility that provides athletes with access to a range of resources, including strength and conditioning equipment, physical therapy, and sports science support. A number of countries with UFC fighters. As of April 2023, fighters from over 70 countries have competed in UFC events, according to the organization's website. Some of the countries with the highest representation in UFC include the United States, Brazil, Russia, Canada, and Australia. Revenue. According to Forbes, UFC generated over $900 million in revenue in 2020, despite the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. Fighter earnings. According to ESPN, the average earnings for a UFC fighter in 2020 were around $147,965, with the median earnings coming in at $68,500. The number of fighters. As of April 2023, UFC has a roster of around 700 fighters, according to its website. These fighters come from all over the world and represent a diverse range of martial arts backgrounds. Venues and events. UFC events take place in venues all around the world, including the United States, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Each event typically features around 10-12 fights, with the main event featuring 2 high-profile fighters competing in a championship or non-title bout. UFC in the Olympics. As of now, UFC is not an Olympic sport. However, there has been some discussion about the possibility of MMA, mixed martial arts,